Imagine waking up and realizing you're not the one in control. The choices you make, the fears that hold you back, the way you react to people, pressure, love. What if none of it was ever really your choice? What if every decision you've ever made wasn't truly yours, but a reflex scripted by something hidden inside you? Carl Jung called it the shadow self, a hidden part of your psyche, the part you were taught to reject, the anger you suppress, the envy you deny, the desire you pretend doesn't exist. But here's the truth. Ignore it all you want. It's still there, watching, waiting, pulling the strings. In fact, the less you face it, the more it controls you. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. If you've ever felt like you're living unconsciously, controlled by forces you don't understand, then this exploration into the shadow self is for you. Subscribe now to understand the real psychological mechanisms that truly control human behavior. So, ask yourself, are you really in control, or is your shadow pulling the strings? To answer that, we need to go deeper into the part of you that lives in the dark. To understand the shadow, you first have to understand how the human mind is built. Picture an iceberg, the part floating above the water. That's your conscious mind, the version of you that faces the world, the curated thoughts, the polite expressions, the socially acceptable emotions. But beneath the surface, hidden in the depths, is something much larger and far more powerful. That's your unconscious. And within it lives the part Carl Jung called the shadow self. It's not evil. It's not a monster. It's just everything you were told you're not allowed to be. The emotions you weren't allowed to feel. The impulses you were told to deny. The traits that didn't fit the image of who you were supposed to be. From the moment you were born, you began adapting. When you cried too much, you were told to stop being weak. When you got angry, you were scolded. When you stood out, you were told not to be arrogant. So you split. You shaped a version of yourself that would be accepted, the part Jung called the persona, the mask you wear to survive, to belong, to be approved of. But everything that didn't fit that mask, it had to go somewhere. And so it was buried, hidden in the shadow. But what gets buried doesn't disappear. It just retreats into the basement of your mind. Picture a locked room inside you. Inside that room is every part of you that you weren't allowed to be. The rage, the pride, the desire, the ambition, the raw, untamed confidence. And that door, it doesn't stay locked forever. Here's the truth. The shadow is not your enemy. It's not trying to destroy you. It's trying to be acknowledged. It's the voice you silenced, the truth you denied, the self you were told to reject. And when it's ignored for too long, it starts to fight back. Not through logic, but through sabotage, projection, irrational fear, emotional overload. Most people spend their lives polishing the mask while pretending the shadow isn't real. But ignoring it doesn't make it harmless. It makes it dangerous. Because the less you're aware of your shadow, the more it controls your decisions, your relationships, your life. And worst of all, you won't even know it's happening. You'll think you're acting freely. But the truth is, You're being moved by something you never stopped to face. But when the shadow slips past the mask, who are you then? Let's find out. The shadow doesn't scream. It whispers. It doesn't come as a monster. It shows up in your reactions, your judgments, your fears. And the less aware you are of it, the more power it has. Here are 3 ways the shadow quietly runs your life without you realizing it. First, projection. This happens when you reject a trait in yourself, then obsessively notice it in someone else. Ever felt irrational irritation towards someone? You don't like how arrogant they seem, how loud, how dramatic. But ask yourself, what are they really triggering in you? Often, we judge in others what we were never allowed to express in ourselves. If you were taught that ambition is selfish, you might resent people who go after what they want. If confidence was shamed, you might mock those who own their power. The shadow uses others as mirrors, so you stay focused outward instead of turning inward. Second, self-sabotage. Ever ruined something just as it was going well? You ghosted the one who saw the real you because that version terrified you. You delayed a dream project. You minimized your success right when it counted. That's not clumsiness. That's your shadow protecting an identity, even if it's limiting you. Deep down, you may carry beliefs like, I don't deserve this. Good things don't last, so the shadow makes sure they stay true. You don't sabotage to fail. You sabotage to stay familiar. Because, to your shadow, suffering is safer than change. Third, emotional hijacking. Ever snapped over something small, felt jealousy out of nowhere, or froze? Even though nothing was wrong, these are not random moods. They're emotional flashpoints, buried wounds being touched. You're not just reacting to the moment, you're reacting to an old story. One the shadow still holds close. It feeds your nervous system lines from behind the curtain, lines you never chose, but still live by. And the most dangerous part, you think it's just you, but it's not. It's the version of you buried long ago, now fighting to be seen. Because when the shadow gets tired of whispering, it takes over. And that's when life breaks. Let me show you what happens when the mask finally cracks. Michael was always the nice guy. Polite, agreeable, quiet. He avoided conflict, stayed under the radar, and rarely spoke up. When interrupted, he smiled. When overlooked, he stayed silent. On the outside, he seemed peaceful, but each silent nod was a brick in the wall. And behind that wall, something primal was waiting. Michael was taught that anger was dangerous, that wanting more made you selfish. So he buried his frustration, swallowed his jealousy, shrank his voice. And with every act of suppression, the shadow grew stronger. Stories like Michael's aren't rare. They happen everywhere when people live unconsciously. If you want to understand how to reclaim control of your life, subscribe to explore the practical psychological strategies Jung left behind. Until one day, it snapped. In a meeting, his boss blamed him for a mistake he didn't make. Normally, he would have apologized, but not this time. Michael stood up, voice shaking, eyes burning. I work harder than anyone here, he said, and I'm done being invisible. The room froze. His boss was speechless. Michael's hands trembled, his chest pounding. It felt like the voice wasn't his, like the shadow had finally spoken for itself. But it wasn't madness. It was truth. Raw, unfiltered, and it had been waiting for years. That was his shadow. Not an enemy, but a buried self that had finally broken through. That night, he couldn't sleep. He replayed it over and over. Where did that come from? It had always been there. The rage, the resentment, the need to be heard. Carl Jung called this shadow possession, when the ignored parts of your psyche erupt and take over. And it's not rare. It's happening everywhere. Quietly. Take another example. A woman raised to be nice, quiet, and obedient. She never raised her voice. But each holiday, when her mother judged her life, her job, her choices, something inside her cracked. One year, she exploded. Not with calm words, but with fury. It shocked the room. But deep down, it felt relieving. Because that outburst wasn't just anger. It was the shadow reclaiming space. You see, when you repress truth long enough, it doesn't vanish. It waits. And when it returns, it doesn't whisper. It roars. If you don't face your shadow, it doesn't just influence your actions. It rewrites your perception. You won't just feel pain. You'll think the world is pain. You won't just feel anger. You'll believe everyone's out to get you. So, if you've ever looked back and thought, what just took over me? It's time to ask, how do I take my power back without abandoning what's real? If the shadow is what controls you in the dark, then shadow work is how you begin to see. Carl Jung believed that true transformation begins not by denying the shadow, but by confronting it, not with force, but with awareness. So, how do you begin? There are 3 essential steps. Simple in form, profound in effect. Step 1. Identify your emotional triggers. The shadow speaks through emotion. It doesn't write essays. It sends signals. Whenever you feel a reaction that feels disproportionate, anger, jealousy, shame, pause. Instead of asking, why did they do that? Ask, why did this affect me so deeply? Your biggest triggers often point directly to what you've repressed. If you hate arrogance, it may be because you were punished for confidence. If laziness infuriates you, perhaps you were taught your worth only comes from productivity. Your discomfort with others is often a map to the parts of yourself you've buried. Step 2. Shadow journaling. This is the practice of writing without filters, of allowing your unconscious to speak without interruption, judgment, or correction. Find a quiet space. No phones. No audience. Start with this, but be warned, this might hurt. What emotion do I fear the most? What part of myself feels unacceptable? What do I judge most harshly in others? Now write, raw and unedited. You might be surprised what surfaces. Jealousy, masked as indifference. Resentment, buried under kindness. Desire, disguised as fear. Let it come. This is not about perfection. This is about presence. Step 3. Integration. Most people try to fight their shadow. They say, I need to stop being angry. I need to stop feeling insecure. But Jung taught that power doesn't come from rejection. It comes from relationship. Imagine sitting beside your younger self, the child version of you who was told not to feel, not to want, not to speak. Look them in the eyes and say what no one ever said to you. I see you. You're not wrong. You belong. Because once the shadow feels seen, it no longer needs to scream. Integration means taking back the parts of you that you thought made you unlovable and realizing they were never bad, just misunderstood. Your shadow is not your enemy. It's your strength in exile, your voice, your truth, your vitality, waiting to be reclaimed. And here's the paradox. The more you fight the shadow, the more it fights back. But the moment you turn toward it with compassion, you begin to dissolve its power. Because what lives in the dark is not just pain. Sometimes it's potential. And once you stop fearing it, you may discover that what you've been avoiding is actually your greatest source of strength. Most people try to escape their darkness. They run from fear, suppress anger, déni désir, and call it self-control. But what if true freedom doesn't come from rejection, but from reclamation? Carl Jung was right. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But what he didn't say is this: once you do make it conscious, your life is no longer fate. It's choice. This is not just theory. This is the hidden mechanism behind every self-sabotaging pattern, every repeating conflict, every cycle you swear you'll break, but never do. Because whatever remains unconscious runs your life from below. But here's the part most people never learn. Your shadow doesn't only contain your wounds, it also holds your potential. Jung called this the gold in the shadow, the lost parts of you that were once full of life, but were shamed, silenced, or buried too early. The fire you thought was too intense, the voice you were told was too loud, the gift that didn't fit the mold. What if your creativity was never gone, only hidden? What if your confidence didn't disappear? It just wasn't safe to express. Some of the greatest minds in history, artists, scientists, visionaries, didn't transcend their darkness. They integrated it. They used it. Their genius was not the absence of struggle, but the ability to turn pain into fuel. This journey from being controlled to taking control requires courage and deep understanding. If you're serious about reclaiming your power, subscribe to continue exploring the powerful psychological tools that help you live with true autonomy. And the same is true for you. Because you are not just your light. You are also your dark. And when you stop splitting those parts, you stop living in fragments. You stop surviving in fragments and start living as one. So now, we return to the beginning. Remember the iceberg, the surface self you show the world, and the depths beneath. You've seen the unseen. You've stepped into the basement. You've unlocked the room. The question is, now that you've seen the full iceberg, will you keep wearing the mask? Or finally, reclaim what lives beneath it? Because from this point forward, you stand at a threshold. You can continue being controlled by what you avoid, or begin choosing with full awareness The shadow will remain. But now, you hold the light. So let me ask you, have you ever caught yourself in the middle of a choice and thought, why did I do that? Like something deeper was pulling the strings. That moment is a glimpse beyond the surface. What have you been avoiding inside yourself? What part of you have you buried but still feel in every decision? Leave a comment below. One thing you did that made you realize, I don't even know who I am right now, because awareness begins where denial ends. And if that voice inside you isn't fully yours, it's time you meet the others living in your mind. In the next video, we'll go deeper into the hidden forces inside you, Jung's archetypes, the inner characters shaping your thoughts, emotions, and destiny. So, if you're ready to meet the parts of yourself you've never truly known, subscribe and keep going.